A recent Ipsos Mori survey suggests that 3/4 of Brits rate our economy as poor.
Well, that's not what the IMF and PwC said last week. So the IMF
reality, though, isn't it? And that's what the public think. So
the perception of global CEOs is that the UK is second only to the US in terms of how attractive it is to invest in our country. The IMF has upgraded our growth forecast. We're the only country in the G7, apart from the US, to have the IMF upgrade our growth forecast. Wages are going up. Inflation is down.
So really and truly, chat, I know that the people overwhelmingly say that they think the economy isn't in a good place. I know the people think that. But have you considered that the CEOs think that we're a really good place to invest in? They think everything is fine in the UK. They've upgraded our growth figures. Have you considered that people are wrong? But what's crazy, right, is that for so long on the left, people like us on the left, we were told you can't tell the electorate that they're wrong. The electorate tell you what's correct, and then you go to where the electorate is. And yet, when the centrists get into government, they will get defended to the hilt by journalists, by everybody, by the entire political sphere, for essentially saying everything is good. There is no problems. PricewaterhouseCoopers, who, by the way, are so deeply entangled with the Labour Party, they will second staff to MPs' offices for free because they want internal access to the state, as far as I'm concerned, is the only reason that they would do that. And yet they get trotted out by Labour ministers as to why, actually, public full of idiots. Public may think that things are bad, but at the end of the day, the CEOs think it's good and the IMF does, so jog on, British voting electorate. This is extra crazy. This is extra crazy in that the Democratic Party lost the election because people's perception of their economic conditions was low. It didn't matter that the macro indicators were good. It did not matter that they were the fastest growing economy in the G7. It did not matter that bottom quartile wages were outpacing inflation. The perception of where the economy was and where people's living standards were was low. People saw price go up. Burger price went up equals world more badder for the American population. And at no point at all did the Democratic Party think, let's meet the public where they are. Let's say, we've made some mistakes. The Trump campaign, when they were in government, they were the fault of the inflation. The pandemic happened. We can't control that. But there are big corporations raising their prices. There are corporations making record profits, right? They're price gouging you. That's the kind of line that was taken during the cost of living crisis in places like Spain, in places like Mexico. In Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, immediately after taking office, convened the Mexican Chamber of Commerce, loads of different private sector CEOs and business leaders, and said, look, I am the government, make your shit fucking affordable. I don't care that you want to make profit, right? I am the person who is governing this country for the people who elected me. Sort your shit out. Agree between yourselves to cap the prices of basic consumer goods that are necessary for the poorest in society. And you know what? They did it. Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo was successful in driving down the cost of everyday essentials by convening basically the entire private sector as a consortium to bring these things down, because she recognised that it does not matter if your macro figures are good if people perceive the economy to be bad. Have Labour learned anything from this? Have Labour learned anything from Kamala Harris saying we did nothing wrong? Mark Cuban is here standing next to me, a billionaire, saying things are good. Please vote for the Democrats to continue all the good things. We didn't do anything wrong in the time that we were in government. We're not going to create an enemy. We're not going to find a reason to blame somebody else for the bad things. We're going to pretend the bad things aren't there. At least saying the corporations are the problem, at least creating an enemy would have helped the Democratic Party not lose the election. And they couldn't even do that because, of course, the corporations will donate to the Democratic Party. What a surprise. They couldn't say the corporations are price gouging you. They couldn't talk about greedflation because that would impugn the people who pay their checks, which to them is far more important than saving American democracy. And the Labour Party, having seen the failure of the Democrats in government, are now going down the line of doing worse policies than them and all the same rhetoric about how they and the CEOs and PricewaterhouseCoopers and the IMF have all said that everything they're doing is great. Actually, plebs, you're wrong. PricewaterhouseCoopers have determined that you are wrong, electorate. These are supposed to be the excellent communicators of the natural party of government. And it's like they've never spoken to a real person in their life. They've not just gone down to somebody who's struggling a lot right now and saying, well, actually, it's the corporation's fault. We're doing the best that we can, but there's only limited time and limited resources. Give us some time. But instead they're going, poor little plebs thinking the economy is bad when the IMF disagree with you. And at the same time, this is after an incredibly dumb message they did before Christmas, where Keir Starmer took a picture of him with Larry fucking Fink, talking about how Labour were going to partner with BlackRock to rebuild Britain. The connections, the corporate connections they were making with BlackRock as an institution, when they must know, if they just spend any time talking to normal people, that there's like a huge cohort of normal people out there, just regular normal people out there, who think that BlackRock are out there to try and destroy society with the woke mind virus. Now, of course, they're trying to destroy society because they're private equity, and that's what private equity exists to do. It is the force destroying a lot of society anyway. Like, they're not wrong that BlackRock are the problem, but they're not doing things because they ideologically want to eat the bugs. They're doing things because they want to make profit by not providing anything useful to society, any useful social utility, but they want to be able to cannibalize the profits of other people through private equity. That's what's the problem with BlackRock. They're an asset manager. There's great interviews with Brett Christophers on Novara Media about the problem with BlackRock and private equity. And Keir Starmer, in his infinite wisdom, decided to use this as their social media pitch to the electorate. Just insane stuff. Again, it's like they haven't spoken to a normal person at all whilst they've been in government. Like, minus 50% approval rating, but the CEOs think it's fine. IMF say it's good. PricewaterhouseCoopers, not a problem. It's not an issue. It's just not an issue, chat. It's not an issue. It's almost as if the only people they speak to is briefcase wankers. Very, very true.
It is a tough economic inheritance that we inherited 6 months ago. It was 7 months ago. It was never going to be easy to turn around. We inherited an economic mess and public services on their knees. So it has been a tough inheritance, but we are absolutely determined, as part of our plan to change, to drive economic growth, put money into people's pockets, and ensure that people's living standards are rising, in this parliament.
Okay, you trumpeted chief.
And that's the thing, right, is that if they'd have just gone with the line, rather than banging on about CEOs and PricewaterhouseCoopers and the IMF, they could literally have just said, we've increased the minimum wage. We've put the minimum wage up. Wages are growing in this country. We are working on fixing the relationship between labour and capital in this economy, so working people see more income in their pockets every single day. We can't make the prices go down. I think this is something that no politician has effectively communicated to people. The prices aren't going down. That's not how economics works. Because we haven't had an inflationary spiral in this country, basically since the 70s, a lot of people were economically illiterate to the point where they didn't realise the prices were never going to go down. The way you beat inflation is by having wages higher than inflation. That's how you maintain living standards. And so people think people really have this communicated to them very well. So the actual important part here is to say, we need to increase your wages to meet where the new prices are. And if they just talk about this, that would be fine. But they're obsessed with talking about just the big red growth button. And to do that, they have decided to prioritise the opinions of super rich and billionaires and arm's length financial institutions over the intuitive position that people who actually have to live in the economy are taking with regards to where the economy is.
Executives saying that they think that you're doing a great job as far as the economy is concerned. One British businessman, Nick Wheeler, who founded Charles Towett, is saying the government is anti-business, and that's the reason why he's curbing investment in Britain.
Well, we're not anti-business, and we absolutely want to drive investment, which is why at the weekend the Chancellor was talking about bringing down the barriers to growth, particularly around planning reform. For too many years, planning rules and judicial review have prevented the development of infrastructure and investment in our country, and we're determined to change that. We're taking the long-term reforms that we need to take after inheriting an economic mess from the Tories. So we're determined to drive growth across the country.
Southport.
That's the thing, is that it's fine to say you're going to reform planning. It's clearly a problem. A lot of people admit that planning is a problem. That's great. But the rest of it just essentially involves trying to deregulate the entirety of the economy to try and attract as much FDI as possible, regardless of the negative utility. There was an article in the FT by Janan Ganesh who was really fucking risible, a risible man with terrible opinions, right? But I think there was something important in the article that he wrote, which was essentially that people don't actually want growth. They want what comes from growth, but they don't want the actual growth itself because they're not willing to prioritise growth above all else. Because, of course, the problem is that unlimited, unchecked growth comes from deregulation. What does deregulation give you? Negative societal utility, negative externality. It gives you negative externalities over and over and over again. It causes environmental damage, it causes pollution, it causes everything that happened under Liz Truss. It involves eroding the rights of working people. It must necessitate negative externalities if you have growth as the highest priority. And Jan and Ganesh was making the point that, well, actually, growth is the most important thing. We shouldn't care about these negative externalities. But this is the push-pull that you get. And once people experience the negative externalities, they're not going to like you very much, regardless of the growth measure. That's why you can't put growth as the central theme. It has to be a broad strategy with guardrails on to prevent these externalities from happening. Like, where do you think the deregulation that led to Grenfell came from? It came from the desire for people to make money, regardless of the consequences. People wanted to have a massively efficient shipping system before the pandemic. That was the way that you were going to be growing as fast as possible, by maximizing efficiency in global shipping procedures. What that meant was there was zero contingency, no contingency at all. So as soon as the pandemic happened, massive backlogs globally, all shipping grinds to a halt because they didn't care to have slack in the system in case there was even a teensy bit, even a tiny bit of disruption. That's why what happened with Ever Given was such a fucking massive problem when it blocked the Suez Canal. Suddenly these shipping routes all got disrupted and it massively affected global shipping everywhere because there was no slack in the system, there was no contingency. That's why I get so frustrated with talking about the efficiency of the NHS. It is a public service to keep us healthy. It is not supposed to be efficient, it is supposed to be redundant. It is supposed to have redundancy built in the system as a whole to ensure that we don't need to flatten the curve when the fucking pandemic happens. Is to ensure that no matter what situation it is, if there's a problem with a pandemic, you have slack in the system to deal with the problems. And yet, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.